Alrighty.
The Sasquatch with the spatula.
Okay, Dark Bleatings, everyone. I'm really particularly excited about this interview because this is our 50th interview since we started doing them last year. And I thought it was only right to bring back the person that we started it all with. So Richard Dansky is with us again today. Hi, Richard.
Hello. Thank you for
Um,
having me back.
there could be nobody else for the 50th interview. It had to be you. And for those who are uninitiated, Richard writes kind of in almost every medium. You might recognize his name from some of your favorite AAA games, books, tabletop stuff. There's all sorts of stuff. You've covered quite a lot of bases with your storytelling and your work, haven't you, Richard?
It keeps me off the streets. It's
Keeps him off the mean streets. So last year when we started doing interviews on this channel, I didn't know who to ask first, but I really wanted to kick off interviews as a thing with somebody that I, really looked up to, that writes in sort of multiple mediums that I'm really interested in. And I don't think I ever said this to you, Richard, but when I first approached you and asked you to do this, I really didn't think that you would, because I hadn't done it before, and the channel is really small and everything. But you were so kind and gave me so much of your time and so much great information about your work and everything, and it prompted me to have the confidence to ask other people that I thought would never say yes as well. And that's spiraled into me getting to speak to a lot of my other favorite creators and authors. So thank you so much for basically kicking this whole part of the channel off.
Oh, you are quite welcome. I am so glad that I was able to provide something good for you. It's great to hear.
Yes, it was a really interesting conversation to me. I will link that first conversation we had in the description for anyone who might have missed it. But you told me all about writing for games, so storylines and dialogue and everything. We learned about Sand Guy, or Sandman as people were calling him.
We're not talking about Sandman right now. We're talking Sand Guy.
Sand Guy. Yes, and your start in tabletop, and then also we talked about your collection that was recent at the time, the meeting at the Devil's House. So we got to talk about a lot of aspects of your work. What have you been up to over the last year since I last spoke to you?
Oh, I have been keeping busy. I had just turned in the manuscript on my first nonfiction book, which is called The Video Game Writer's Guide to Surviving an Industry That Hates You.
Oh, yeah.
So it's sort of a love letter to writing video games, but it's a very angry love letter. And it's a book about how to actually do the job of being a video game writer. There's a lot of wonderful advice out there about how to write well and what sort of things you write for a video game. But there was always sort of a dearth of knowledge of how you do the things that are important to the job that are not just writing. How you get your work in front of people, how you build feedback loops, how you survive professionally in an industry that is not always really kind to writers, frankly. And so I saw a place to maybe share some of what I've learned over the last 25 years.
I have seen you posting about that, and I cannot wait until it comes out so that I can read it.
Oh, cool. Well, I hope you enjoy it, and please tell me what you think.
I think I really love non-fiction about specific creative sectors and with information, and I think that will be really interesting for anybody that's interested in the kind of work that you do, especially, and then anyone who's just been interested in your career in general, and anyone interested in sort of like a creative standpoint about the process and work, because a lot of people don't talk about the behind the scenes or like the business side of things. But that's really helpful, I think, to people who are especially aspiring to get into those sectors.
That is the hope. It is all the stuff that nobody taught me that I had to figure out on my own through trial and error and more error, and then there was some error and a little bit more error. But I'm very much invested in the notion of game writing as a craft. It's something I've been doing most of my professional life. I was there for really a lot of the evolution of the craft. I've contributed, I think, in some small ways to it. And if I can sort of take what I've learned and create a little bit of knowledge that helps people build their careers and helps build the craft, that's really important to me.
Oh God, I'm really, really excited. I can't wait to, I'll probably be submitting a request for an advanced copy of that when it's ready, so I can take a look at it.
Let me know when the publisher gets to that phase. I'll pass your name along. Okay.
Oh, amazing! Thank you. In the time that you've been working in the industry, how do you think it has changed for people who do your kind of work, the writing and the creative side?
It has been multiple complete re-evolutions of the role, really. When I first started, there were no game writers. The writing tasks got handed off to the designers because the designers wrote documents, and documents were made of words, and there you go. Or we're really crazy. The game lead designer had a friend who ran a really good D&D campaign, and they brought that person in. But there were no dedicated writers, and there was no such thing as narrative design. And it was all very much sort of an afterthought. It's where the term narrative wrapper came from, which is, okay, you make a game and then you draw sort of a story on top of the game. And what has happened since then has been a combination of factors. One, the audiences have gotten more sophisticated, and let it be known they're more interested in emotional journeys and characters that they can love and things like that. And two, the tools and the technology have gotten better to let us tell better stories. I remember a game called L.A. Noire was the first one to really have good facial animations. And every game writer I know is thinking, oh my God, we don't have to spell everything out. We can have people just visually react. That was a game changer. And we've had a bunch of those along the way. And also, since studios in many cases have recognized that there is value in game writing and game narrative, in the systems for delivering narratives as well as the actual words, there has been the creation of these roles. Full-time narrative designers, full-time writers. My current job is I'm a narrative director, which means that I have all sorts of people working narrative in my group. And it's really cool and it's amazing. And we're getting to do fantastic stuff that was completely undreamed of when I first started the industry. I mean, my first couple games, the writing was you got a briefing at the beginning of the mission, which was a giant wall of text. And then there was, I think, 2 lines of dialogue when the mission started, and that was it until the end of the mission. When we gave you a debrief, and that was all the writing and all the storytelling we did, and like the early Ghost recons and things like that. And now, I look at a game that I work on, like Assassin's Creed Nexus, that had 135,000 lines of just systemic dialogue, not even story dialogue, but systemic dialogue. And it's not even a world of difference. It's a different galaxy.
Yeah. When do you think that change came in? Can you remember when it started to shift that way?
It's been incremental. There's just little bits here and there, and it just keeps building. Obviously, you had big moments. The success of early BioWare games, for example, really opened a lot of people's eyes. Just every little bit helped. And it was big games like those BioWare games. It was small games like Life is Strange. And all of those games demonstrated that there was value to investing in storytelling, in narrative, in writing. And smart people picked up on that. And there was never a revolution. There was always an evolution. And I run these narrative roundtables at GDC, the Big Game Developers Conference for game devs. And I've been doing the writers' narrative roundtables since 2007 or so. And in the beginning, the complaints were all, oh my God, they don't bring us in until the last moment. My goodness, nobody listens to us. There are no other writers. And just this litany of woes that were all 100% accurate. And I look back now, almost 20 years later, all that stuff gets taken for granted. Nobody makes games without doing that sort of thing. All the stuff that was incredibly aspirational and pie in the sky when those conversations started. We've got new concerns, we've got new worries. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had to write a book. But the ground rules have changed so much, and so much for the better in a lot of ways, that it's it's really remarkable.
Yeah, I think the impact of a good narrative direction in a game can't really be understated for people who really like to be immersed in a game. Because great gameplay mechanics and puzzles and stuff are amazing, and great, great animation and graphics is amazing. But I only really get invested in games when there's a good narrative arc or a really great character dilemma or something. And I think we talked before, I was a big fan of the older Final Fantasy games, and I remember playing Final Fantasy X, and there was where I think when they redid it for the later PlayStations, there's an achievement for if you speak to everyone and experience all of the dialogue that's in game. And I was playing it last year at some point, and I thought of you when you were telling me about all of those separate pieces of dialogue that you were writing for. I think you said it was Far Cry. And I just thought about being in the writer's room, coming up with these thousands of lines of dialogue for, but that's usually where you find out if the writers are funny, because it's those little pieces where they could write anything, and you find a lot of really funny stuff around the game, little extras for that. I was just trying to imagine Ghosts of I can never say it. Thank you. Without a good narrative overview. That.
Yeah. No, I joke about it. Look, I love gameplay. I love game design. My first job in the video game industry was as a game designer. And I will never undersell the value of great mechanics and gameplay and balance, things like that. But nobody has ever cosplayed as a game mechanic.
That's true. Yeah.
And there's a narrative builds a sort of a level of investment and attachment and identification that nothing else in a game can give you, and that gets people excited about more than just the game, more about the world and about the game that's coming next and the additional content and all the other stuff. And so I think a good, appropriate level of narrative is...
Yeah. There was a game that came out a few years ago that I thought struck a perfect balance between mechanic and story, and it was I think it was called It Takes Two. But it was a co-op game where you're a married couple, but the married couple are separating, and they have to work together to solve this dilemma that they're in. And then all of the games are really fun. And I was like, this is so wholesome, but it has stakes, but it's really cute, but also it's quite emotional. I thought that was a great team that must have worked on that, because hours of fun to be had on that game.
No, it was a great game. More power to them, and my congratulations to the team that worked on that. Another one, What Remains of Edith Finch, probably my favorite game of all time at this point.
I haven't played it.
It's a short, I won't call it hardcore horror, but it certainly has deeply horrific elements. And they do such a wonderful job of marrying gameplay to narrative and never having a mechanic overstay its welcome and shifting up the narrative to support the fact that you're changing gameplay elements. And it's, again, I talk about an appropriate level of narrative. Not every game needs a Baldur's Gate 3 level of endless dialogue. And Baldur's Gate 3 is an incredible achievement, and it does what it does perfectly. And it has the right amount of narrative for it, but not every game needs to do that. And the trick is to find the sweet spot where you're giving people enough narrative they can marry the narrative fantasy to the gameplay fantasy and create a better experience.
Yeah. What in your opinion makes great gameplay mechanics? What would you focus on?
I would focus on ease of accessibility, that it is fun to do, that it is quick to understand, but takes time to master. So there's an ongoing challenge to get better at it. It's rewarding to keep doing the mechanic, but the mechanic is not a barrier to your gameplay. Yeah,
I agree. I'm not. I love games, but I am not what you'd call a good gamer. So
neither am I. This is why I play walking simulators a lot these days. My fast twitch got up and twitched.
Yeah, there is something amazing about a game that anybody can pick up and get to grips with quick enough where you can start enjoying the game straight away. But there's a lot of fun to be had in improving and understanding everything a little bit better. In terms of your so stories as in like books, short stories and longer pieces of work, do you have anything in the pipeline at the moment?
I have a bunch of short stories that are going to be released in magazines and anthologies this year. One of the ones that I'm really proud of is called Pause, which is a tip of the cap to Jaws, of course. And it's about a married couple and something, possibly a large invisible cat, starts leaving them presents at the end of the driveway. And things go terribly, terribly wrong from there, because it's one of my stories and things always go terribly wrong for people. But that one is one that I'm really proud of. And there's a few other in the pipeline. There's a sort of Twilight Zone-ish tale called Used Sleep. That'll be coming out in Space and Time magazine. And it's my take on one of the stories about the magic junk shop that pops up and you buy the magic item and then it goes away and you can never find it again. And it's my take on that, and it deals with a little bit of loss and grief, and also what if the guy running that shop is actually kind of a jerk.
Oh well, that's always compelling to me. That sounds really good. I was looking back over the your last collection, and I was just wondering when I would get my hands on a brand new solo collection, is what I'm hoping for. Where are you spending most of your time professionally at the moment? I assumed games, but I could be wrong.
Well, I am very lucky to have a wonderful day job in games. I work for Romero Games, which is wonderful. Great people to work with, just some of my favorite people in the industry, and I get to do really cool stuff, and I am loving it. I started there in January, and I am still walking on air. So that is.
So
and then I go upstairs after work, and then I write my own stuff. So January was largely spent buried in the game writing book. And now I'm working on an unannounced project that I can't talk about, but I've signed the contract for, and it's an amazing project collaborating with someone who is absolutely incredible, and I can't talk about it, and it drives me nuts. And then I'm writing short stories around the edges. So I've got, I think, 4 short stories that are all halfway done, and the fun never stops. I'm blessed with the opportunity to write in so many different media, and I try and honor them all by giving them all as much attention as I can.
You're just feeding more into my theory that you're actually a vampire that doesn't need to sleep, because you sound very busy.
Yeah. Though I did more work on Wraith than on vampires, so.
What do you do in your capacity as a narrative director? How is that different from I was gonna say just a writer, but I don't mean like just a writer, but I just assume that you have extra responsibilities as a narrative director.
Yeah. There's a lot of things. I'm getting my hands less dirty, is the short way of putting it. But I am the go-to person on the team for narrative. And at one level, that means representing narrative and writing and all of that on the team leadership level and saying, hey, we need this. Hey, we can't meet this deadline. We need to shift things. Hey, this is holding us up. Hey, this is a really good idea that we should do. Art, engineering, what do you think? And so there's that level of interfacing with the team leadership and supplying them with what they need to know about what we in the narrative group are doing. And at the same time, I turn around and I am senior narrative person on the team. So I do a bunch of things, like I look at every writing deliverable and every narrative deliverable that comes across, and I give feedback on it. Say, hey, this is really good. Hey, this needs this tweak. Hey, this is a problem. Can you fix that? I always try and do it in a way that encourages people to find their own solutions. I never want to just go, boom, do this, because that's not what you have another person on the team for.
Yeah.
You want them to find their solutions. Otherwise, there's no point for them being there. So I try and encourage and develop everybody. I've got 25 years of experience that I can share. A lot of tips and tricks and things that I've done that can help improve stuff. So I share that, and I give guidance, and I give feedback, and I at the same time carry their ideas up to the management group, up to the director level. And so it is all of that. And then there are times when I have to jump in and do some writing as well. So
it's writing and then also overseeing like the project and like steering the ship a bit when you need to.
The narrative side of the project,
yeah.
I make sure that our stuff is getting delivered on time, in good shape, and that we're getting what we need from other people, and we're giving other people what they need, and that it's all building towards this harmonious whole. And I advocate for stuff up the ladder. I communicate stuff down the ladder. I occasionally jokingly do what I refer to as being a shit umbrella. That has not been needed so far, but it's my job is to be there to be the voice of narrative and everything that comes with it.
That sounds amazing. When you're working with the rest of the team, is it like a TV? Like, do you have like a writer's room like they do with TV shows, and you like sit and go through everything together and then decide who's doing what, or like how do you split up what everyone is doing?
Every studio has a different model for that. There have been games where I was literally the only writer on a giant AAA game.
Oh my god.
On The Division, for example, we had a 5-person writing team with 1 person in Sweden, 1 person in Newcastle, me in North Carolina, and 2 on the U.S. West Coast. So writer's room was kind of tricky. There are times when you gather everybody together to talk about assignments and collaborate and give feedback. There are times when everybody just retreats off their own corner to do their job and then comes back with something to give feedback on. It really depends on the needs of the studio and the personnel you've got and the team structure. What happens a lot, I find, particularly with distributed teams, which are common these days, is that someone will create something, make it available to the rest of the group, and then you have sort of asynchronous feedback. I do a lot of my editing, for example, in the afternoon here, after everybody in Galway has left for the day, hopefully, and I really hope they've gone home at that point. And so you do the best you can with the people you have and the structure you have, and it really pays to be flexible. I know there are games that use the Hollywood writer's room model very, very closely. The games I've worked on largely have been much more loose in structure and flexible and adaptable, in part because we've always been distributed teams, and in part because the business of writing narrative for games is so constantly changing. Deliverables pop up, deliverables go away, things get prioritized, things get deprioritized. It's not like you're making an episode, then an episode, then an episode, then an episode. It is, oh my God, this other team needs this right now. Can you get some writing on it? And so there are things that are unique to game writing that you have to be flexible for, and no other model quite matches it.
Yeah, it sounds like you have to be quite like adaptable in the moment for things to shift timeframes and everything. And I suppose that would be different to if you've got sort of like a book deadline, because it's just you working on the thing until you hand it to somebody else, and then it's quite linear with books, whereas it sounds like you could get sort of stuff flying at you from every angle during the process when you're putting the game together. It sounds
can and will.
Yeah.
And there's iteration, and there's stuff that happens that changes. Hey, if this level gets cut out of the game, then these characters no longer make sense, and this conversation needs to be changed, and this cutscene needs to be rewritten, and it's a constant state of flux, and you have to be adaptive. That's where what I call Dansky's first law of game writing comes in, which is that words are always the cheapest fix until they're the most expensive. And when something happens, the cheapest and easiest fix is to say, okay, writing fixes it. We write some new dialogue. We write some new voiceover. we changed the story a little bit. That is faster and easier to iterate than building a new character model, getting new animations in, building a new space, things like that. And that works up until the moment you go into the recording studio and start spending real money.
Yeah, I remember you telling me last time about that area of things. I think I must have asked you if you're sort of like brought back in to change things later, and you told me that it's not as simple as that, because the actors may have already finished recording the dialogue, and that would mean getting higher in the studio and the booth and getting the actors back and everything. And that was the first time I ever realized how the collaborative process for putting games together is so much different to everything else that I've ever heard of in terms of like story construction and keeping everything together. I don't think that I would have the mindset to be able to keep track of it, because I'm easily stressed by change. But it sounds like you've might not be the perfect environment for me, but it sounds like, is this something that you get used to over time, and you know, get a bit like it feels a bit more seamless to deal with, or do you get bewildered at all by things like this?
Well, there's three important things to bear in mind. One, this is what people call producers are for. It's their job to wrangle and organize chaos. They live in Jira, they breathe spreadsheets and flowcharts, and they are amazing people. And I'm glad to have worked with some really wonderful ones, and I don't understand them at all, but God bless them. No, it is their job to tame the chaos, so we can get, us scatterbrained creative types can focus on what we're supposed to do without worrying about what's going on over here and what's going on over there and everything else. Two, I have a really short attention span, so things going crazy all the time actually kind of works for me.
That's how you can hyper focus into your things and.
And if I get blocked on one thing over here, oh great, there's a fire over here, I'll go put that out. And the third thing is that you really do get used to it professionally. A lot of people will come into the field thinking that things are very formal and structured and whatever, and as soon as the rubber hits the road, they learn very differently. And if it's this is a good place for you to be, you very quickly learn to embrace the wild changes and surprises and things like that. You want to minimize them, but you also, one, they're coming, and two, every so often it's kind of fun to ride the tornado and bring it home. And then afterwards you can go sit with your fellow game writers in a bar somewhere over a tasty beverage and say, okay, so here's one that I did. And we all swap the war stories. And
I'd imagine that the sort of unpredictable aspect of the profession does keep it exciting and interesting. Like, you're never going to have a dull day.
It is not boring, no. I have gotten some fabulously surprising feedback and direction and things like that over the years. The Splinter Cell Double Agent, I think I might have told you the story, where we found out that Michael Ironside, the actor who played Sam Fisher, the main character, wasn't doing any more recording sessions. And we hadn't written some of the levels yet.
Oh, yeah.
And so what I had to do is I go back and there's a bunch of dialogue that we recorded from that we weren't going to be using. So I went and listened to all of that dialogue, and I pulled individual lines out, and I built other conversations from these random scraps of recorded dialogue. So all the other characters are doing all the heavy lifting, and then Sam Fisher say, I don't agree with that, or something like that. But nobody knew that it had been constructed out of bits and bobs and odds and ends and built around just the leftovers from something else, because we were never getting them back in the studio for that game. And it was crazy. It was insane. And on a certain level, I can't believe that you pulled it off. And on another level, it's like, wow, I pulled that off.
It's a very great problem solving, by the way, but also just very economic use of everything you already have. And yeah, I'm glad that came together. I can just imagine going through the recorded dialogue that wasn't yet used. Like, hang on, where can we use this, because we have these other scenes. So yeah, I'm fascinated by sort of like the live nature of this, because it feels like such an electric industry like atmosphere to always be working in.
Mhm.
Yeah, once again, sorry, I know we're midway through, but thank you so much for doing this. Like, I love talking about this stuff with you because it's so it's just such a great insight into the world of your profession and your professional life.
It's my pleasure. I'm happy to talk about this stuff and to share the knowledge and tell the stories, and I'm just glad it's something you enjoy.
When you were how long was your non-fiction book in the works? Did you have the idea to put that together a while back, or?
It's sort of crystallized. I jokingly tell people I've been writing this book 25 years and I just decided to put the words down now. But it crystallized as I was on my way out to Game Developers Conference in San Francisco last year. And I was sitting on the plane and I was bored out of my mind, and I was just thinking about writing and what my next project be. And I realized I wanted to write the Kitchen Confidential of game writing books because I had so many stories, and I thought they would be amusing and interesting and instructive. I sort of ran with that, and I talked to a bunch of my game writing peers at the conference. Said, "What do you think?" And the reaction was about 90 to 10. 90, this is great. Write this book. I will buy it. I need to read it. And 10%, oh my God, are you out of your mind? But in a good way. And so Toya K. Finley, who is a writer I know, and wonderful person, she took me and introduced me to her editor and gave me the opportunity to pitch the book. And middle of summer or so, we struck a deal. And so I then did what every good writer does and procrastinate.
Yes, naturally.
But I started really putting words down on it in November, and I turned in the draft in January.
Oh God, I'm so excited. Did you with the way that you wrote it, so did you approach it sort of like autobiographically, or did you have more? Was it more just like purely information based, or did you like mix it up with anecdotes from your career and stuff? Sorry, I'm just trying to get.
It's okay. What I do, well, the publisher insisted that I actually provide an outline. They weren't just going to say go write a book. They actually made me prepare a little bit, which was completely alien to my style of writing because I'm a total pantser. But that I gave them an outline and I used that, and the way it was set up, it didn't have really a throughput. It had a build chapter to chapter to chapter, but all the chapters were distinct. There was no core narrative. There was just, here's a topic, here's a topic, here's a topic. Maybe this topic benefits from being after that topic. And so I wrote it chapter by chapter, and I bounced all over the place, and I reshuffled them. And a couple of them I smooshed together, and then I stuck a new chapter in, and I heavily drew on some of the pieces that I put on LinkedIn, just as we're using that as sort of a testing ground for some of my thoughts on this stuff. And before I knew it, what was supposed to be an 80,000 word book was a 95,000 word book. And I was lucky enough to have a lot of my professional peers willing to look at a couple of chapters here and a couple of chapters there, or even the whole book, and give me their feedback and their recommendations. And with their generosity and thoughtfulness, I was able to really improve the book and iterate it a couple times from when I first finished it to when I turned it in to the publisher. So I don't recommend doing it that way. I am a maniac, and as a veteran of tabletop role-playing, I do not believe that there's a maximum word count you can reach in a day if you're really under pressure. But it was a lot, honestly, so much of the writing process was just letting these thoughts marinate and figuring out how I was going to communicate them and sort of doing little test runs on LinkedIn. And then when the time came to compose, I was just blasting out several thousand words a night and doing so in a way that felt good and felt appropriate. And I only repeated one anecdote, which Anthony Johnston was nice enough to call me on. But it is sprinkled through with some of the anecdotes from my career with the serial numbers filed off for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
I jokingly told people I was going to call this book Lot's Wife because it was so salty. But the salt got toned down a little in favor of being a little more generous of spirit and a little more instructive. But there's still some horror stories in there.
Well, people people do enjoy a nice little horror story sprinkled into the non-fiction. I'm so excited about it. It sounds like it's the sort of game equivalent of Stephen King's On Writing.
It's funny that you say that, actually, because one of the blurbs I got from a game writer I've known for 20 years and worked with was the on writing of video games.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm completely sold. I cannot wait for that. I know it'll be a while if it hasn't long been turned in, but I'm just going to be sitting here twiddling my thumbs waiting for it. So in terms of your overall career, is there something that you can pinpoint as the most surprising thing that you've learned about your profession or yourself as you've been working as a writer?
That's really interesting. The way I look at it, I've had 3 careers, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I have the tabletop role-playing career, I have the ongoing video game career, and I have the fiction career.
Mm-hmm.
Each of them has honestly been a constant array of surprises. Some of them really good surprises, some of them less good surprises,
Mm-hmm.
but there have been so many wonderful moments. For fiction, for example, when T. Kingfisher, Ursula Vernon, mentioned my book on stage at a reading as something that people should pick up and read.
Mm-hmm.
That was an absolutely thrilling moment for me, because she is such a fabulous writer. Mm-hmm. And in fact, she thought my book was worth other people picking up, meant the world to me. Mm-hmm. In video games, the first time I heard people quoting dialogue that I had written because they thought it was cool, and yet there were a bunch of lines in Splinter Cell Conviction that people were just quoting back and forth. Mm-hmm. Fisher, I used to work here and have to work on the bulletproof thing, and just that. And that was a wonderful moment. And of course, Sand Guy that I told you about last time.
Yeah.
This one random dude on a beach changed the entire play experience for a bunch of folks. And yeah, with role-playing games, goodness, so many. Obviously, you look at something like Charnel Houses of Europe, and mm-hmm. look at the impact that book made, and the fact that it is still being discussed in some circles 30 years later, mm-hmm. as a supplement for I'll be honest, it was a second string product line for White Wolf. Mm-hmm. The fact that it has endured and made an impact, and I like to think it hopefully helped pave the way for some more serious work in the field. Mm-hmm. That was a really important moment.
The sincere sort of peer recognition from people that you admire is one of the one of the most surreal but wonderful things to experience. Mm-hmm. I think does it ever occur to you that you're inspiring other writers?
It took me a long time, honestly, to accept that I had that kind of impact, if that mm-hmm. makes that kind of sense. I will be honest, and we're going to turn this into a therapy session for about 10 seconds, but
go on.
It really was not until last year that I was finally in a good place with myself and my career and my work, and was able to understand and accept my experience and my expertise and my standing in the professional community. Mm-hmm. And I had always worked very hard. I never thought I did bad work, but I would never give myself, I think, an appropriate amount of credit. I always wanted to do things, I always wanted to give, but it wasn't really until last year that I finally was in a place where, yeah, I am the right person to be giving this stuff in this way. Mm-hmm. And I am very happy. And along the way in my career, I have mentored and developed a whole lot of people. And I'm really proud of that, because they have gone on to do amazing things. I have done the student competition at GDC, and I've seen students who have been in that go on to fantastic careers in the industry. And I'm so happy that I was able to help them on that way. And I'm finally at a place where I can accept that I did a lot of good, I think, and that I am worthy to be doing this good, if that makes any kind of sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of really valuable experience and knowledge to share with people. And then I think, I find you to be a very humble person. So it probably is a bit of like a jarring thing of like realizing that you're somebody that a lot of people look up to, and they look at your career and they're like, oh, I wish I was, you know, people are aspiring to be like you. And it probably, yeah, it must feel strange, but it's just it's a byproduct of like all of the great work that you've done, and you deserve the recognition that you get. You've just done such great work in storytelling across so many mediums. So sorry, that was me just gushing for a second. I lost control of myself. Sorry if I embarrassed you.
No, not quite. Thank you. I very much appreciate it. It's very kind of you. And I also, there's at least one other storytelling medium coming. I can't tell you what it is yet.
Oh, I'm so excited. Well, I won't try and guess then if you can't tell us what it is, but I'm really excited.
I am waiting for them to tell me I can announce this, and it is just a dream project. It is something that I've wanted to do for years, and it took a whole lot of work to get to the place where this thing was actually real. But I'm about a third of the way through the actual writing of it, and it's a dream project, and I'm so thrilled and so happy, and I can't wait to share it with the world.
Oh God, I'm so excited. There's so much exciting stuff on the horizon from stuff that you've created recently. I'm going to be just like on your social media. And I was like, is it out yet? Is it out yet? It's just checking. Yeah, I'm really excited. Oh, yeah, really excited. Well, I felt after the first time we spoke last year, that really kicked off like I think I've done an author interview at least one every week since I spoke to you that first time, because then I had enough confidence to go and ask some other people. And it's the influence that you've had on me, just for like this little side of my website and my YouTube channel and stuff has been big, because you made me not afraid to approach people because you were so nice when I approached you. We had such a good conversation, and I probably was a little bit of a blabbering mess because that was my first ever one as well. But hopefully I've improved a little bit over time and stopped being so nervous.
You were great, and this is a delight. And
Oh,
I'm so happy that you brought me back because this is just fun.
it's I was just really excited to get to speak to you like a year later and see what's changed and things. I remember us talking last time about fangirling and fanboying over people that we're fans of, and I told you about I embarrassed myself in front of Tim Levin, and since then he'd probably find that so silly now, because since then we've become friends, and that thing about sort of like other people recognizing your work. I literally cried last year because I was just listening to him on a podcast, and they asked him if there were any good books he'd recently read that he'd recommend, and he recommended mine. And I literally like burst into tears because I was like, oh my God, I feel so, that's very validating to me. So but yeah, like funnily enough, I thought back to you when we were speaking, and I was just saying it's just so weird when you meet your idols and everything, and then yeah, sorry, I don't know why I brought that up. I was just excited to tell you it.
I will tell you, I am so glad that I was something good for you.
Oh, yeah.
I had a total blithering fanboy moment of my own in December.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm a huge fan of a band called the Drive-By Truckers. And Firefly Rain, my first original novel, was written in large part to their album The Dirty South. It's a tremendously inspirational album, and I love their music. It is smart, and it is complicated, and it kicks ass, and they're really cool people. And it had been my mission for about 15 years to try and get in front of one of the lead singers of the Drive-By Truckers, Patterson Hood, and hand him a copy of the novel just to say thank you. And I kept on missing. And last year at one point, I was supposed to go to a private house concert that he was giving. It was like 25 people. And I got sick the day before and I couldn't go.
Oh,
and
no.
The universe was conspiring against me ever getting this book into his hands. And then last year in December, he played a show about an hour and a half from where I live, just a little solo show. And I said, the heck with it. And I grabbed a friend of mine who's also a fan, and we got in the car and we drove out there. And I went to the venue and I grabbed a copy of the book for no reason that I can think of. And walked in, and I was talking to one of the folks who worked at the theater. I said, hey, I have a present for Mr. Hood. Is there any way I can just get this to him? And the guy said, he's over there at the merch table. And so I went over and I totally fanboyed. I love your, just completely incoherent. And, but last year I voice directed and wrote for and hung out with Post Malone, and I was cool. I chatted with Ray Bradbury. I was cool. I chatted with Harlan Ellison, and I was cool. I chatted with Joe Hill. I was cool. And musicians, game designers, writer, I have been cool. And I got up in front of Patterson Hood and went, and my language skills deserted me. And he was very nice and very generous. And he took a selfie with me and signed a poster for me. And I actually ran into him last weekend at another concert for the Drive-By Truckers, and he mentioned that he had actually read the book. And
cool!
So my heart went, and
that's amazing. Oh, yeah, that's amazing. I'm so happy that you got to meet him and give him a book and have that experience. Yeah. And happy, I don't know why it brings me some sort of delight to know that even at your professional standard, you can have a sort of fanboy meltdown moment, like the rest of us.
I call it the great chain of goobing. Everybody goobs on somebody.
Yeah.
When I was working at White Wolf, Raymond Feist, the fantasy author, was doing a signing at a science fiction bookstore in Atlanta. And I walked in the store, and there were some White Wolf fanboys who fanboyed on me. And then I went and I fanboyed on Raymond Feist. And I was much younger then. And then he was fanboying on the fact that he'd hung out with REM the night before or something like that. And I realized at the moment, we're all fans of somebody. And it's cool.
Yeah, I think no matter how professional you are and how cool you normally are, there is going to be somebody that your sort of reflex reaction is just like, it'll happen to me if I ever meet. I dedicated my short story collection to a band called Periphery because their music inspired basically everything in the book, and that's one of my missions. Is I tried everything I could to actually send the book to them, but I of course couldn't get an address because you can't just get people's addresses and they don't have a PO box. But I'm determined that when they next come to the UK and I can see them, I'm going to somehow get that into the backstage area or something.
2 questions. 1, is your book available in the US?
Yes.
Okay, because I need a copy, so I'm going to buy one now.
I can send one.
2, find their management company. And that information should be publicly available, and the address of the management company should be available. So you can send it to the management and they can pass it on to the book.
I think I'm just not a very good sort of internet sleuth because they produce their own music. So they wrote I'm sure they have a manager, but I just couldn't find them. So I'm going to have to do a little bit more deep diving. But yeah, that would be... I just want them to have it, just to know that they inspired a book, even if they don't want to read it or don't like it. I just...
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I understand that 100%. That is what I was chasing Patterson with for 15 years, and thank God he didn't have me arrested. And
that's quite the long game mission for 15 years. But I feel like the fates did line up for you in the end, though. That you just I'll just take this copy. I'm just gonna grab it. Just feel like I should grab it.
It was a perfect sort of graceful denouement to the whole, and I'm glad it worked out the way it did because it's a better story that way. Yeah,
it's so cool that you got to gift the person, gift someone who inspired you something that you created as well. So yeah, there's a lovely sort of symbiosis to that, creative types to that. Everyone's got people who inspire them, and it's really cool when you get to actually meet them. Even if you do lose your mind for just a second and lose the ability to form normal sentences. Do you can I just quickly ask you about the game game developers conferences, are those like conventions, or are they like smaller event? Like, are they smaller like professional events? What is a game developer conference?
Okay, there are various game development conferences of various types around the world. Game Developers Conference, GDC, is the big professional one. And that's in addition to having seminar or what we're called summits, which are intensive sessions, and tutorials, which are all-day lectures. They have lots of presentations along various professional tracks, and they have a huge expo floor with people presenting technology and books and games and places to work and things like that. And it's a hub for the game development community to come together and mingle. And there's a lot of formal stuff that gets offered at the conference, and there's a whole lot of informal stuff that happens in the hallways and the bars and the parties. And so that's a must go on the calendar if you can. But there are a ton of other ones. Some of them are consumer focused, like PAX, where it's about the fans coming together to play games. Some of them are publisher focused, where it's the companies getting together to show off what they've got coming along and what they've put out. Some of them are more academic. Some of them are tightly focused, like Narrascope or Ludonarracon, which are two that are obviously in my wheelhouse. And really any flavor of game development you're looking for, there's a conference for it, whether big or small. The trick is finding one that is near you and that fits your resource availability. But even then, most of them have some sort of online component, and even if they don't simulcast things live on the web, they'll record the talks and make them available. So you can find, for example, talks that I gave at GDC 15 years ago in the GDC vault, or at ECGC, the talk that I gave in 2022 is up on YouTube, and you can grab that.
Oh, that's cool.
And the material is out there. I do recommend getting to conferences if you can, because the FaceTime is invaluable, and the random meetings and introductions are something that can't happen online. Just going to lunch with somebody who invites you into a crowd with other people, who then introduces you to the rest of the crowd, and maybe somebody else in that crowd is looking to hire, or it worked on a game that you loved and you want to pick their brain. That sort of synchronicity, as much as I love working remote, there are times when you got to get in the same room with people.
Yeah, this for anyone listening and watching this right now, the value of face-to-face events in the sector that you want to be in or that you are in, they're amazing, because I go to sort of like writing conventions like FantasyCon, Edgelit, things like that, and not only do you just get to meet people who are similar to you and you get to make a lot of friends that way, but it is just an amazing place to meet people that can give you more information about things, and you hear about opportunities at these things and everything as well. So yes, I second that. I'm a big fan of the in-person events. I have this wild idea about everything game related, because I've never been to like a gaming convention or conference or anything, and all I know is what I've seen online. And what I saw online was oh gosh, I can't believe, I want to say Mick Gordon, but I feel like that's wrong. But the guy that wrote the Doom soundtrack, and I saw there was a gaming convention where they played the Doom soundtrack live, and it just turned into a heavy metal gig. And that's what I've had in my head whenever I speak to anyone. I'm like, yeah.
They're wild. I mean, you've got all these brilliant, talented people in one place, and crazy stuff happens. I will give a plug right here for a writing friend of mine, Andrew Walsh, who is a very senior figure in the UK video game writing scene. Wonderfully talented person, incredibly nice as well. And he does a lot for the Writers Guild of Great Britain, promoting video game writing talks and conferences and appearances and things like that. So if you are watching this and you are interested in video games and you're in the UK, check out Andrew Walsh and listen to him and go see him speak, and the people that he brings to speak with him were all absolutely brilliant, talented folks. And I swear Andy didn't pay me to say this. I'm just putting that out there.
You can drop the ransom now. No, I was just
You can let my cat go, Andy. No.
free the feline. Yeah, I think anybody interested in doing what you do for work will like find this conversation invaluable, Richard, and that's a great place for UK people in the UK to. That's a great name for people to look up here as well. There's a whole world of stuff out there that you can enjoy and get into, and the professional side of things. It's yeah, in-person events are amazing. I hope that we get to meet at one at some point, Richard. I do want to come over to the States at some point to attend something. I just, time, money, schedule, and all of that stuff. So.
I understand. Well, I would highly recommend, depending upon what sort of experience you're looking for, NeCon in New England in late summer is my absolute favorite con. It is not a big business con. You're not going to sell books there. Mm-hmm. It's basically summer camp for horror writers.
Oh.
So a bunch of us and folks in the horror community and really, cool fans get together on a college campus for a few days. There's one programming track. There are, there are guests. There's one mass signing, but it's mainly just being together as a community and hanging out. Mm-hmm. And this year, I'm actually the Toastmaster, which means I am working with all sorts of toast, rye toast, toast points, But in any case, I'm getting to interview some amazing folks on stage and just be a part of the festivities. But it's something I've been going to for more than, I think, 20 years at this point. And it is a wonderful, wonderful place to be, and wonderful community that exists year round and then comes together at this. So if you can make it to NeCon.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, that sounds like just like my kind of thing. I would love to attend that. I'm gonna have to look it up and check it out. So
campnecon.com. That's okay. The website.
Cool. Richard is not sponsored by this company, by the way.
No. I do this for free.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I can't believe that it's that time that I'm going to have to release you again. It's just gone so fast. But yeah, once again, this was the 50th interview, and it's a little, I consider it a little milestone here, and I'm so happy that I got to bring you back for this one, Richard, and get to talk to you again. And I really appreciate you taking the time. Gonna have to get you back for the 100th one as well.
Okay, it would be my pleasure and my honor. And if you don't mind, I am going to continue telling writer friends of mine that they need to come talk to you because you're awesome.
Oh, have you been doing that? Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, I have. If you hear from a guy named Michael G. Williams, I sent him.
Oh, I think I had an email. Yeah, cool. Oh, amazing. Oh, well, thank you very much, Richard. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
For anybody who is unfamiliar with your work, either with books or games, is there a good starting point or a favorite project of yours that you would like to recommend?
If you want to try my fiction, A Meeting in the Devil's House, the short story collection, is probably the best place. It's got the widest range of my stories, from really dark horror to more lighthearted horror. But I think that's probably the best place. In terms of video games, more in terms of stuff that I've done relatively recently, that's tricky. I'm really proud of the work I did on the Division franchise. So that's a game that's still out there, and highly recommend people playing that. And the folks doing narrative now, Warrenstone, are just doing an amazing job telling that story. So, check that out. And tabletop, if you feel like diving into the past, Wraith the Oblivion, still, I worked on it for a long time, but it's one of my favorite games for a reason, and it will always have a place in my heart.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to put links in the description, of course, so that you can find Richard online and all of the stuff that we've talked about and everything. Definitely check out Meeting at the Devil's House. I loved that collection. I had such a great time with it. And, if you're a gamer, obviously, check out the games that Richard has worked on. You'll have a great time, and you too can discover the joys of Sand Guy. So
he's in the book. I put Sand Guy in the book.
Oh, goody! I can't. Yes, and as soon as there's any further word on your new book or your non-fiction book, Richard, we'll going to do a little promo on the website for that as well. So yes,
thank you.
Keep your eyes peeled, everybody, and I'll deliver the news as and when I hear it. So I'm really looking forward to that. And thank you again, Richard. And we'll just sign off for everybody else now. So we'll see you next time, and bleat.
Thank you so much for having me.